Hi, and welcome to Across the Desk. This week, we're going to continue with our series on 2021 legislative session and the bills that are being introduced. And usually, I like to highlight the crazy, wacky ones, the ones that are just way out there in fantasy land somewhere that you just really need to know about. And I thought I was going to get that when I went to the medical marijuana section, and I wanted to see a bunch of the crazy stuff that they tried to pull last year, like keeping medical industry businesses 2,000 feet from a church property, whether it was leased or owned or borrowed. Never made it. But I figured I was going to see that. But I was kind of pleasantly surprised. And this week I kind of want to talk about the good laws that they're going to be trying to pass in the legislature when it comes to our medical marijuana industry. Now I just want to say there's been a bunch of bills that have been introduced in this 2021 legislative session when it comes to medical marijuana. Pretty much all of them help the industry out. So I just want to say one thing. I usually come down on conservatives pretty hard on this show. And I just do because they're easy targets that way. Because one thing they don't do well is govern. They don't do it very well. They're always listening to their crazy evangelical base, trying to govern on some fantasy land, toonish ideas, and it just doesn't work very well. But here we go. They're actually putting together some plans, actually doing stuff to legislation to help clarify language, help it expand, and do a lot of really cool things that I think we ought to applaud them for. Yeah, man, this is what governing looks like. This is what you should be doing more of. And I want to highlight that here. Now, I'm going to highlight 6 of these bills. And one of them I really have issue with is Senate Bill 522 by Zachary Taylor. And he's got this bill that requires the Medical Marijuana Authority to use a third-party vendor when it comes to issuing licenses. I'm not really sure of why we need this bill. They seem to be doing an okay issuing them and doing it in a timely manner. I'm not sure if there's just been higher volume or what the story is onto why we need to get a third-party vendor involved in issuing licenses for patients, caregivers, dispensaries, everything else. But this guy wants to compel the Medical Marijuana Authority to use a third-party vendor when it comes to issuing licenses to people to use medical marijuana or sell it or grow it. Now, the only thing that I have in this provision that really sticks out to me a little bit is that there's a provision that says you really don't have any recourse. If they decide to reject your application, your only recourse is to go back to the Medical Marijuana Authority and say, hey, I don't think it should be rejected. But at the end of the day, the Medical Marijuana Authority really doesn't have the authority to decide if you get to keep that. They'll take in your request and then they'll go back to the third party and ask them again. But at the end of the day, the third party gets to decide whether you have a license or not. Now, I have a real problem with this. One thing is, and this is this conservative thinking, that we need to privatize everything. Well, you know, I just don't think that works for everything. Privatizing some industries when it comes to government services makes sense in certain ways. It does. It's cost saving and it helps. But these are usually for temporary things, like construction of a building or a certain length of roadway where the contract's a limited number of time and space. So there you have it. This is something that's perpetual. And this is the thing that we get in trouble with when it comes to long-term contracts with private entities in our state. One thing is, the conservatives in this state have really gamed our state into a plutocracy. Now what that means is, if you have the money, you get to make the rules. And this is a cycle that we see. We see it with Epic. Okay, we have, we need public charters and private charters, and so we open the door for these private charters to come in, be as big as whole school systems like Epic. And what happens? They take over. And this is how it happens, is it's a cycle, and it's a cycle of money, because they give Epic a bunch of money, Epic turns around, pays that money back into dark money packs and political action campaigns, and buys influence with it. Well, that influence gains them more power. which gains them more money. And then they got more money to buy more influence. And before you know it, they have so much influence you can't get rid of them. And that's exactly what's happened. That's exactly what we've seen with Epic. And it's exactly what we'll see with third-party vendors when it comes to things like the Medical Marijuana Authority and issuing licenses. We will get to the point to where these people get so powerful that you can't get rid of them. And then they'll be able to do whatever they want. Next up is House Bill 2482. This bill does a few things, and one of the biggest things it does is it allows those serving in municipalities to be able to have medical marijuana licenses when it comes to dispensaries or groweries or anything else. Now, the way the law was, if you are, or actually is, because it's not a law yet, it's just legislation, the way it is if you are working for a municipality or a sheriff's office or a county office like that, or an employee of it, you cannot have a medical marijuana license. I'm not sure if that counts for patients or caregivers, but as far as having a license as a business, you couldn't do it, or there was provisions that just weren't real clear. So this actually clears some of that up and allows for elected officials to actually own a medical marijuana business. It also, though, says that if any type of ordinance before a municipality or any kind of legislation comes due that's on medical marijuana, they need to recuse themselves from any kind of vote on it or any kind of decision making when it comes to that. They should abstain themselves since they are a part of the industry. Now, we know that's kind of a double standard, because I just did a show on the oil and gas industry when it came to Senator Mark Allen, and saying that, you know what, since they're in the oil and gas industry, they should tell us exactly what to do. So this is kind of one of those, well, you know, likes to dish it, kind of not real good at taking it kind of things, but I get it. In all respects, this is different than oil and gas. We're talking about a medical prescription drug here that people use for medical purposes, so it's a little different, and it's affected. It does, you know, affect your mental abilities. So we may not want that to determine marijuana policy, especially if you are in the business and doing it. So that kind of makes sense. But I am glad they did come up with a provision that says, hey, you know what? If you are an elected official within a city and you are that, then you can have a grower's license or whatever else, because there really wasn't a clear provision for that as the way the law is. Now, the next bill I want to highlight is House Bill 2216. Now, what this one does is allows for people with out-of-state medical marijuana licenses, whose states allow you to use that license to buy medical marijuana in other states. It's going to allow them to do that, which opens the door for more business to people outside of Oklahoma whose states allow for that purchase across state lines. So this opens up more business for the medical marijuana industry, and it's good for Oklahoma. It allows people from other states, like I said, to come here to our dispensaries, and as long as they're on the list that's going to be provided for by the Medical Marijuana Authority on who these people are, or what these states are that will allow that, then as long as they show a valid medical marijuana license, you can sell medical marijuana and medical marijuana accessories and other products to people out of state if they have a medical marijuana license from said state that's on the list that allows across border purchases. This is pretty cool. House Bill 2216 by Representative McDougal. And here we go. Another great bill that helps the medical marijuana industry out, furthers it along, gives us more revenues in our stream, and really progresses the medical marijuana industry in the state of Oklahoma. Okay, another bill I want to highlight is House Bill 1960 by Representative Fettgarter, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But anyway, he's got a bill here, and by the way, this guy has a lot of the medical marijuana bills that are in for the 2021 legislative session were done by this guy, Fettgarter, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But anyway, here we go with another one that's really good for the medical marijuana industry, and what it does is it allows for delivery service to private individuals from dispensaries for marijuana products, marijuana accessories, and edibles, anything else. So it allows a provision to allow delivery of medical marijuana to private residences is what it does. A lot of different states have this. Colorado, California, I know, has had it for a long time. This is a whole industry has come up with just delivering marijuana to private citizens or whatever, to their private homes. And this is a good thing for Oklahoma. It's going to allow to even expand the medical marijuana industry even further. And it's going to be allow for more safety, I believe, in the fact that, hey, we're going to have somebody that's going to be delivering this. People aren't just driving around getting it, could put them at risk. And this does a good service to the state of Oklahoma. This next bill is House Bill 2763 by Representative Ford, another Republican, who put together a legislative bill here for drive-through windows at dispensaries. Now this makes sense in a lot of ways. With COVID going on, I'm pretty sure that's probably how this came about, or at least really made it into a catalyst that helped spur it on quicker, because other states do have drive-through windows for their dispensaries. So this is Oklahoma catching up, and we did it probably through the pandemic, had a lot of reason as to why. Because right now, dispensaries are doing curbside service already. They're doing curbside. I personally believe a drive-through window would probably be a lot safer than curbside service. So there's one aspect of this. And two, it's just common sense. It's going to help further the lives of Oklahomans here in Oklahoma. Now the last bill I want to highlight on this medical marijuana crusade is House Bill 1961, again by Fettgarter. And this one's a really cool one, and it's probably a really important one. What it does is it sends to the people of the state by ballot initiative, because we'll get to vote for it if it does pass through committees and everything else. What it does is it legalizes marijuana consumption for those over 21 with a valid ID. You heard me correctly. If you're over 21, if this law passes, if you're over 21 years of age and you don't have a medical marijuana card, but you have a valid ID, you can buy marijuana at a dispensary. That's what this law does. Not only that, what it does is also, if you're not a marijuana patient and you don't have a card, what you do is you'll be paying an extra 15% tax. It's in the bill. And that goes for, because other people are buying their licenses and getting it and you're not, so you pay more tax. That kind of makes sense to me. But this is a really cool law or bill that's being proposed so that it goes as a state question to the people of Oklahoma to legalize marijuana consumption for those over 21 with a valid ID. That's it. You're over 21, you have a valid driver's license or passport or anything else they consider valid. If you go in and show them that, then you can buy marijuana with an extra 15% tax. This is basically legalizing marijuana in the state of Oklahoma, is what it is. That's what it's doing for those over 21, which makes it like alcohol or anything else that's similar to that. So that's pretty cool. This is actually a Republican, Fettgarter, going to take the medical marijuana laws that we have in place, expand on those to actually legalize it for all citizens over 21 who have a valid ID. I think that is great legislation we should all be able to get behind. I think that ought to pass. I think it probably will, especially since this is authored by a Republican, and I can't imagine that many Democrats or liberals being against that. And I know there's probably zero libertarians that are against it, because let's be honest, a libertarian is just a Republican with a bomb and who is probably atheist. That's what they are. So we know they're for it, and you know that the liberals and the Democrats will probably be for it. And if this is what comes out from a Republican, then you know what? Within a year or two, we could have legalized marijuana for those over 21 with valid ID. That's the exciting news on that one. So there you go. A list of 6 medical marijuana proposals that are coming up this session in the 2021 legislature that actually do good things for the medical marijuana industry. Well, except for one going to a third-party vendor, which I'm just really not sure about. But the other 5 do great things. And these things right here from Republicans in our legislature actually doing governing, actually doing work for the people of Oklahoma, not trying to put obstacles in their way, not trying to hinder them for being a certain way or doing certain things that they just disagree with, but actually helping the state of Oklahoma by expanding on our medical marijuana laws that we have in place right now. Well, that's my show this week. This is Across the Desk with Kit Fairchild. I believe we'll see you next week.